Welcome back to Microsoft Flight Simulator World Tour. We are currently in Reykjavik in Iceland. Landed there last time. It's currently Monday, August 8th at 2:11 p.m. Eastern Time. I think today we are going to fly... I was toying with the idea of just flying all around Iceland. I did that a little bit on our last flight, kind of explored the northwestern part of Iceland and got down to Reykjavik to land. This time we might just fly along the southern coast of Iceland. We'll probably fly until we get to the southeastern most part of Iceland. And that's where we'll land. Find an airport somewhere there and land. And then next time we'll take off from there and head over to the UK. As far as podcasts today, I think what we're going to do, there's no Tony Kornheiser show from today, August 8th. So I think what we'll do is listen to the Sharp and Benning radio show from Omaha, Nebraska for a while. And then if we still have part of our flight remaining, we might play a little Men in Blazers. The Premier League in the UK just started this past weekend. And so they'll be talking about all the first week matchups. And then we'll see if we keep going from there. But for now, we're going to start with the Monday, August 8th edition of the Sharp and Benning show from Omaha, Nebraska, as we take off from Reykjavik and fly around Iceland a little bit.
Base will be Taylor Ward, and the Angels on the board first. It's 1-0 here in the third inning. 0-1 to Bo. Swinging a line drive to the gap in right center field. That's down for a base hit going all the way to the wall. Hernandez got a great read. He's streaking around the bases, turns the corner at third, headed towards the plate, and he'll score on an RBI double from Bichette. 1-0 Toronto here in the second. The pitch. Arenado swings. He hits it a mile. Left field. It's a gunner. It's in the bullpen. A 3-run homer for Arenado. And the Cardinals jump ahead of the Yankees with 2 outs in the second inning.
Left-handed batter against the right-hander. He belts it to deep right center field. Davis to the wall and gone. And Jay Melendez on the first pitch.
Comes Ureña's 0-1. That one hit really hard and really deep to left. Now that's home run number 26 of the season as the Diamondbacks take a 2-0 lead on a no-doubter from Walker to left. 2-2. Here's a fly ball to center field. It's well hit. Way back, and Myers looks up, and it's gone. A home run. Cody Bellinger goes the other way. His 14th home run of the year, and the Dodgers take a 1-0 lead. Here's the 1-2. Swung on, and there's a high fly ball to left. This one's deep. Does it have enough down the line? Home run, Luke Bailey. Onto the home run porch. And there's your first run of the game. It belongs to the Guardians. They take a 1-0 lead. I love how the Angels have just become a walking punchline in the majors. We started off the highlights there saying how the Angels take a 1-run lead in that game, and then they go on to lose it. It's just like Shohei Ohtani probably did something that hasn't been done since 1912. Probably hit 3 home runs, and they end up losing to the Mariners last night, 6-3. I'm Jimmy Allen. I'm not Gary Sharp. I'm filling in all week for Gary Sharp. With me today, playing the role of David Benning, is Fitz from the Church of the Corn podcast. Good morning, Fitz. How are you?
Good morning, Jim. How are you doing?
On a scale of 1 to 46, how nervous are you right now?
About 49.
Fitz is a part of the Church of the Corn podcast. You can catch them here every Saturday morning on 1620 The Zone. You can obviously catch me on After Hours. We'll be back tonight from 6 to 8. We do have your usual cast of characters today, though. Scott Shanley, former Nebraska Cornhusker Super Bowl champion, is going to join us at 8:40. Jimmy Watkins from the Omaha World Herald will join us at 9 o'clock to give us his thoughts on Coach Frost's press conference on Friday and everything going on in Nebraska camp up until this point. We're also going to continue to remember Bill Russell. Obviously, I'm a little bit too young
I think even you're a little bit too young to remember Bill Russell's career. But the more I learn about this man, the more I dive into his life, I want to talk about him and really kind of how the previous generation of players in the NBA felt about him. I went over some videos this weekend of him and Kobe Bryant and him and Tim Duncan. We're going to play those for you later today, and just kind of talk about what Bill Russell meant to I want to say Kobe's era of basketball and how those players have seemed to reflect on his life. We're going to talk about that. The NFL Hall of Fame ceremony was this weekend. We're going to give our thoughts on it. I was kind of underwhelmed by this class, and then I watched the presentation, and it actually ended up being one of my favorite Hall of Fames of all time. One of my favorite defenders in 49er history obviously went in this year as well, and I'm excited about that. Phone calls welcome day, 402-951-1620. You can still get at the show at Sharp and Betting on the JTech Construction Zone Twitter feed. You can get at me, Jimmy Allen 1620. And you can follow Fitz at corn_Huskers. Were you amazed you got that handle, by the way, that was available?
No, but yeah, the fact that it was still there.
It reminds me of the ESPN This is Sports Center commercial of the DMV guy. Is Husk Guys with an S available? No. But we are 19 days away from kickoff in Dublin. Fitz, let me ask you this. Are you more intrigued with this game or nervous?
I'm going to go with door number 3, Wayne Brady, and say I'm excited.
Okay.
I mean, I'm intrigued, of course, but I really am excited. I don't know if I've really been worried about it. Part of it might be the fact that it's Northwestern, and you hate to go down that avenue, but it's not the Purdue-Penn State game. Now, that would be a really, really tough opener, especially if you were Purdue having to play Penn State. But I think being Northwestern,
I don't hate Purdue in the game. I'm just throwing it out.
That'll be the one thing that they're going to be so up and down, but that'll be the game they win, and then they'll drop 2 or 3 to teams that they should have no business dropping their teams to.
Is it because 56-7 a year ago in Lincoln? Is that why you're more excited than anything about this game?
There's that. There's how close they were, and we all know what that relates to, the record. But just, I think the tools that they've got, the players that they have, and the coaches. I really have a lot of trust, and I know we haven't seen anything as a staff in a game situation, but I just think that there's enough knowledge now, there's enough experience, and they're going to...
Experience for sure.
Yes, and find ways to put guys in the right spot. I just think they're ready to go, and I think, and we'll get into this.
Does it feel weird saying that? Because I'm kind of starting to feel that way the more and more I see Coach Frost speak. And I'm a big body language guy, and he literally seems, the past 4 years have seemed like, I don't call it agony, but like almost in pain when he's talking. And we're going to get into his press conference from Friday here in a little bit, but there were a couple sighs, not like of disappointment, but almost of relief in the guys who's put around him, and Coach Whipple, Coach Joseph, Brian Applewhite. I don't know why, Coach Applewhite. I always first name him. I don't know why. But it just, when he's talking about, and even Coach Donovan Raiola, it feels like he's kind of had to drag the wagon, and now he feels like he has people pulling it with him. And obviously, we don't know what this looks like yet. It might look great in practice, it might not. But I think the one thing that we've heard consistently from those coaches that I just named is accountability also. And individual accountability. And the one guy that keeps getting brought up, and I'm going to ask you about this in a bit, is a guy like Alante Brown, who a lot of people don't realize that, he played quarterback in high school and never really played the wide receiver position until he got to Lincoln. And it seems like there are guys that are going out of their way that have been here that aren't the transfer portal guys to take accountability and leadership. And that's the one thing I've been the most impressed with from the locker room standpoint of things. I think we all kind of knew that Garrett Nelson was a tough guy. I don't think that has ever been in question. But it's probably a little bit easier now that some guys have moved on for him to step up and be the spoken leader in this locker room, like we've heard this offseason.
Well, some of the older guys, and I think you see this in locker rooms all the time. You come in and your seniority creates your superiority. And now that,
which is just normal.
yeah, and it is. But Garrett has been patient. His play on the field last year especially, I think, gives him that credence to be able to do this, and he's willing to take it. I mean, he's doing it for the state of Nebraska. He's outwardly spoken about how supportive he is for Coach Frost, and I think giving him the opportunity right now, I probably puts Coach a little bit more at ease. You talked about his size. There are times you watch his press conferences, he's got a little bit of almost a grin to him now, where it's like, I know something that nobody else knows, and I'm not going to tell you. Just wait and see. I kind of get that feel right now, but there's also almost a relief though. Like you talked about his shoulders on the body language, because he feels comfortable letting go a little bit. He feels comfortable just stepping back and kind of being the head coach, and we all throw that CEO term around, but I think this is the year that we might get to see kind of why he was brought in.
The other thing I'm really excited about in this season is that 2021 class being a year older. Just the conversations that I personally have had on air with a guy like Teddy Prohaska that was kind of putting the bear of turning this program around on his shoulders before he even got to Lincoln. And that class specifically, we got the opportunity to talk to the good majority of them on After Hours. Really just seemed to have a very tight-knit bond, and there was the talk about their Snapchat group chat that they were in very early on, and you didn't have to ask them, are you worried about the record, are you worried about the head coach? It was more of an emphatic statement, when we get there, things are going to change. And now, obviously, Teddy coming off that injury, all signs pointing to him and I don't want to say 100% because I don't want to put that on him, but obviously being healthier after the injury this year, got a lot of praise from Jerry DiNardo and those guys when they came to Lincoln from the Big Ten Network. But it seems like there's an emphasis from the 2021 class specifically to make sure things, I don't want to say get turned around, but are done the right way to get this turnaround happening. And obviously, if injuries aren't playing a factor here, I think Turner Corcoran and Teddy Prohaska have probably a breakout season this year, just because it feels like they're the type of guys that won't take, I don't want to say no for an answer, but will go out on their shield before this thing doesn't get turned around.
Well, I think going back to how they were peer recruiting,
those guys specifically, yes,
enthusiasm, and now the mindset that they can do this, they know they're good enough. They also know that there's other guys that are still coming to the university, committing, showing up, transferring here, that the pieces are there, and the idea of putting it on their shoulders, and for Teddy being a Nebraska guy, kind of like Garrett, just like Garrett Nelson, I like what you're talking about. They're ready to, they're not going to just sit and wait. They want to take it to them, and they want to show what we're able to do as a team. And so from the fan standpoint, outside looking in, all we see is the results. They're able to see all those little things, and if they're putting that confidence out there, if they're telling us, hey, we are close, we're going to be there, ready to go, why shouldn't we trust them?
I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I agree with what you're saying, but what if, I'll play the other side of the coin, because I think listen, phone calls welcome today, 402-951-1620. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you trust this coaching staff to get things done? Why or why not? And I think the why not side of it would be, okay, yes, there is a new offensive coordinator. There's a whole lot of change on the offensive staff. The number one portal recruit in the nation, O'Shawn Mathis, has arrived in Lincoln, and all signs point to him being an impact player. But the same guy making the main decisions is still at the top. Your response to that is?
And I know we're going to get to it later, and it goes a little bit back. He is letting go. You said it. He was pulling and dragging that wagon, 3 of the 4 wheels had come off, and he was still dragging it through.
Probably 3.5.
Yeah. They're now through Donner's Pass, and they're ready to go. And I just think if he's willing to let Whipple do what he was brought in here to do, which it sounds like he is, Coach Joseph is getting his guys ready to go, and it's the mindset, it's the conviction to be perfect in everything that you're doing, and then obviously the elephant in the room that was special teams. There's at this point in time,
We made it to 6:20 before you brought up special teams, but go ahead.
well, but it's the thing. That's what people want to see. Can that be fixed? But it's if they're able to on the offensive side of the ball, because the defensive side was trending positively for the last couple of seasons. Played really well last year, and I think can be better.
Which is scary. I agree, which is scary to say, because when you're replacing a guy like JoJo Doman, a guy like Cam Taylor-Britt, both of those safeties having 6 years of experience. But I think the thought process is they can be better. And I think a lot of that stems from, we've heard so much the last 4 years that the majority of the talking and the leadership from the defense has come from those back four guys, which when they're that talented and have that much experience, it's expected. But obviously, when you have a guy like Travis Fisher having the amount of success he's had on the recruiting trail and developing these guys, I think that speaks volumes too. I think adding guys to the defensive line that they have, like an O'Shawn Mathis that brings the amount of experience he has, is going to start up front and work its way back.
What if the
and that's not even including Reimer and Heinrich either.
Yeah. But what if going back to your other side of the coin, the same guys in charge, but what if the reason that things weren't working was the engine that was driving? I mean, for the last few years, we know how impactful he was as a freshman. Things trailed off as a sophomore, right? Talking about Adrian Martinez.
Sure, yeah. Or Taylor if you're ESPN. But go ahead.
Martinez, yes. Injuries, wear and tear, all of that. But was there something beyond that we don't know that didn't allow them to expand into what Coach Frost was able or wanting to do? I don't know. I'm just curious now when we look at some players, you know, the race, Thompson, it's his to lose, but we've got some backups, potential backups that can be really good.
We're going to talk about Casey Thompson in the next segment when we break down Coach Frost's press conference for Friday, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I want to go back to Adrian for a second, because I personally believe that Nebraska on the offensive side of the ball this year will be better. But I also think that Adrian Martinez is going to probably have the best season of his career at K-State. And I think for two reasons. I think both teams are going to benefit from a separation. And because I don't know if enough gets made of what Adrian Martinez looked like pre that knee injury against Colorado. And I know it was the very first game, and there's a lot that's happened after that, injury-wise as well. I think that knee injury took a lot more out of him than we actually thought. Because if you watch that very first touchdown that he scored, where he makes the guy miss in the backfield, goes off tackle for I think 64 yards, and scores that touchdown, he never looked that explosive. And that's nothing against Adrian, but I think that also forced him to try to be better in the pocket, and he gets a lot of flack for holding on to the ball maybe longer than he should have in certain plays, certain times, maybe missing guys or whatever, just not seeing the play develop. But when you have that significant of an injury, and I'm not trying to make an excuse, I'm not an Adrian Martinez apologist by any stretch of the imagination, but planting your foot and throwing downfield becomes there's always a thought, what if somebody rolls on my knee again? And I think if you look at him at the 3 and 6 quarters into that game where that injury happens, and then you look at his movement to that left side for the rest of his career, it was just never the same. And I think this year at K-State, I think when you have a guy like Deuce Vaughn that he's going to have behind him in the running back spot down there in Manhattan, and I'm a huge fan of Chris Kleiman and everything he's done in his career. I think the situation, I think the talent is better this year in the wide receiver room in Lincoln, but I think the situation for Adrian Martinez is better in Manhattan. And that's not a knock against either side. I just think Casey Thompson, what he does is better fit for what they're trying to do now. And what K-State is trying to accomplish, I think, is a better fit for Adrian Martinez. And it's a fresh start for him, right? And I asked you, what's different if the head coach is still the same, the guy making the final decisions is still the same. And I think it's a fresh start. Because not only is he, and I know on Friday he said that he's taken a whole step back, and I don't think he's going to take 100%. And I don't know if anybody could. I don't know if there's any coach in the world that could be 100% hands off with what he was brought in to do, and that's going to be in the back of his mind. Hey, listen, if I take my hands off and we still go 3-9, it's still going to be worth it. And it's human nature to want to jump in, but I think he feels more comfortable, and he kind of addressed this on Friday, feels more comfortable with, if I'm not here doing other things, what I want to accomplish is still being done. And that might not necessarily be a knock to Mark Lubick, or to Coach Lubick. And it's one of those things that when you've been chosen as the savior and the golden boy, and Scott Frost is all those things, and it doesn't work, to not consistently worry about, how do I fix this? I don't know anybody in the world that can accomplish that. I said Mark, didn't I? Matt, excuse me.
That's all right. I heard the last name and I was going with. I knew you were talking about. Let me give you a what if scenario though. What if Adrian Martinez was back this year, and everything else stays exactly the same as it is now on Monday, August 8th, right? Transfers on the defensive side, these run of wide receivers that Coach Joseph and the staff were able to bring in, transfers, recruits, all this stuff. Do you have the same excitement level? Do you have the same?
No, because I think that's part of it, the unknown. I think a lot of the reason.
Do you think he could fit in though? Do you think Adrian could play that quarterback part better now this season than if he hadn't gone to K-State, just based on what he has around him, and if Whipple were here, things like that?
No, and I think that's a lot of the reason he chose to go to Manhattan too, is because I think the game plan has changed. I think you're going to see a lot more intermediate passing, and obviously Pat Narduzzi had to say what he said about Mark Whipple and his choice to throw it more than run it, but that's not Adrian's game, and not what he's been asked to do. Probably not what he wants to do either. And I think it would have been a disservice to Adrian Martinez to keep him here too. Not because of the fresh start thing, but because what they're trying to accomplish isn't his strong suit. And that's going to be the interesting thing with the Casey Thompson versus Adrian Martinez stats this year. And I know it's probably going to be a thing every week, but what Casey Thompson is, they pull the top off the defense, beat the safety deep, beat cover two, throw it over the top, burn them outside the hashes. He's let's get the guys out in space and throw it 3 yards and let our athletes make moves, which you can argue is what Scott was doing at UCF, what he was doing at Oregon, and probably what he wants to get back to. And it's really what made Kenny Pickett a Heisman finalist last year, is because Mark Whipple and those guys, and obviously having Jordan Addison didn't hurt, but they would create space, and then he would be able to use his athleticism. Listen, Kenny Pickett's probably more athletic than Casey Thompson. Casey Thompson can run a little bit. And there's going to be times this season, if you see a couple crossing routes on the right side of the field open up, he's probably going to break a run or two. It's just what this offense is designed to do. And I really like that. What my biggest gripe about the best practice we've seen since I've been here, and we had a great day, was you would hear that, and then the highlight films that in Nebraska's audio-visual team for their Twitter page is probably second to none in the country, would highlight Adrian Martinez running for his life in practice, and interceptions happening, and it just looking like a total win for the defense. But we're hearing all these positives, and you're seeing in the short amount of video or the limited amount of practice time we've seen is short intermediate routes, guys breaking runs. Alante Brown posted a video yesterday, caption, climbing the ladder, going up over a defender and coming down with the ball. Wins for the offense. Now, granted, that could be by design, and hey, let's just show the good stuff on the offense and let's be a little more positive. But I don't think that's the case. Because for 4 years, we've seen it to where the defense, and granted, Mickey Joseph came out and said, hey, listen, we got our butts kicked by the DBs today. We need to be better as a wide receiver room. However, he also highlighted a couple of other guys. And I think for Nebraska fans as a whole, that's been one of the biggest frustrations is, how are we having the best week of practice ever and we can't even snap the ball on Saturday?
Stop telling us and show us.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. But it all comes to a head. This volcano of Nebraska football is smoking. I mean, it is ready to. It's going to blow one way or the other, but it's going to be the coaching staff, whatever it is, or it's going to be, okay, this is what they've been telling us. This is what they've been prepping us for, and it's actually going to happen. And I'm honestly, not to jump ahead on the schedule, but even a loss to Oklahoma, if they're at that point in time 3-1, doesn't derail what I think could be a good season, especially after where they came in from last year.
I know we're only half hour on this thing, but we'll just jump right into it. As far as the schedule is concerned, have you put a number on the win-loss record 19 days out from the season?
I'm just talking to different people and casual conversations. I see him easily 8-4. Easily. I'm putting that in there. Easily. Okay. It just it lays itself out there that if things.
This team hasn't been to a bowl game in 6 years. The better part of half of a decade hasn't seen a bowl game. You're saying easily.
This schedule allows for it. You brought up Jerry DiNardo. The first thing he talked about, the improvement of this team, was based on that schedule. And then you put the talented players around him, the coaching staff.
How much of that is because you don't see the Ohio State Buckeyes on the schedule? Is that a lot of it? Because I feel like it is. If the fact that they've played them 7 consecutive years up to this point, it feels like a lot of the reason people are giving it such an easy slide is because there's no trip to Columbus.
Look at Maryland's schedule, and it is
a murderer's row.
Nebraska light.
Yeah.
I mean, for the last 7 years, what Maryland has to try to do this season it feels like and looks like what Nebraska's been trying to navigate in the Big Ten for the last 7 years. Like I said, I keep going back to it. The schedule allows for it, and that Oklahoma game doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all for that season. But it does start back to the very original question of being intrigued and excited for the season. That Northwestern game sets the stage because we've seen hiccups, we've seen slips and mess-ups early on, and next thing you know, we're going to go right back to the woe's me, and here we go again. But you stack a win, you stack another win, and there are some runs in there that you can get. You can stack up 6 wins pretty quickly, and then see how everything else goes later in the season when you've got to run Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa in some form or fashion of that order.
Let me ask you this, because I think it's a possibility, because we're talking a team that has kind of been glued together, a lot of important pieces. I think the nucleus of this team is still from a year ago, but I think the guys that are going to make a difference are all new faces. O'Shawn Mathis, Casey Thompson, Trey Palmer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're flying across the world. A big-time difference. It's going to be a late night there, but an early morning here. Jet lag's a thing. We've seen Pat Fitzgerald reach into the hat, pull a rabbit out, go from the last in the West to the first in the West, and find his way to Indianapolis at the end of the season time and time again.
And it is an even-numbered year, so we've got that going.
He's due, right? Let's say they stumble in there. And maybe not even, okay, we'll call it a loss. Just for this argument, we'll say they lose Northwestern. You said 8-4. Do you think they can get to 7-5 if they lose that game?
Oh, that radio silence is not effective. I know that. Wow, that's a great question.
It is, and here's why.
And I think yes.
Let me tell you why I asked that, because you brought up the woe is me, here we go again. And I know it's only one person, but I think from a fan standpoint, and maybe even from a Scott Frost standpoint, the fact that Adrian Martinez isn't the quarterback might not allow that to happen, because there is so much with it. Yes, we've seen Casey Thompson get benched at Texas, and we've seen him struggle, but we've also seen the guy that did throw 10 touchdowns in the high school game show up every now and then. And And I think with guys like a Trey Palmer that it feels like has the athletic ability to, and it's a game-changing difference, right? That doubt might not creep in. And I think the coaching staff feels this defense could be better too. I don't think that's just a fan perspective, which is insane to say because we've already mentioned the guys that are being replaced. But I've been on record saying, and I'm going to double down, I think Caleb Tanner has a breakout year and is the guy we're talking about at the end of the season as the guy, I don't want to say fits the JoJo role because that's not what he's going to be at, but has that leap and is talked about as on the stat sheet, the leader of this defense at the end of the year. And all that, and I say all that to say, I think the Northwestern game is very important if they win. But if they lose, I think there's enough leadership on this team that it might even do them some good if they don't pull out that win. Because I think with the score the way it was in Lincoln against this team a year ago, there's a little bit of we can just show up and blow these guys out. And maybe a little bit of humble pie might do them some good because I don't think, even if things come up all aces and go all Nebraska's way this year, I don't think Indianapolis is possible. I just don't. I think Iowa regresses this year, but I think Wisconsin's going to be better than a lot of people think they are. With that being said, I think Nebraska can catch up to it. This season's going to be very interesting. I hate to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I really think that's how wide open the West is this year. But if it looks like it did in Lincoln a year ago, that's a positive. But I don't necessarily think it's doom. I think losing to Illinois last year was doom and gloom. I think 3-9 was a lot of because of what happened in Champaign. But this year, it just feels different, and maybe it is because there's a different looking quarterback. But it's going to be really interesting. Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp this morning. Fitz in for Damon Benning. It's 6:36 on a Monday. Thank you for joining us here on 1620 The Zone. Scott Frost did take to the podium. We're going to talk more Husker football when we come back. We're talking Scott Frost press conference on Friday, our takeaways and more right when we come back on 1620 The Zone. We still got the regular cast of characters on a Monday. Scott Chanley, former Super Bowl winning player and former Cornhusker, going to join us, talk all things NFL, as well as Jimmy Watkins from the Omaha World Herald going to join us at 9 o'clock, talk all things Nebraska. The lineup this morning is powered by John Higgins, Weather Guard. We were talking about, obviously talking a lot of Nebraska football before the break, and then we didn't even get into Coach Ross's press conference from Friday. But we kind of hit on a little bit of what he was talking about. He brought up the leadership on this team, and he feels like the leadership and the attitude is the best since he's been here. And obviously that's a little bit of a punchline because of practices and things like that. But he does seem happier. Does it surprise you he felt he needed to mention he didn't have to? He's talked a lot about leadership when he played here. And how the best teams handle issues and they don't even need to get to the coaches. And he brought that up that it feels like that's happening now. Are you surprised he felt he needed to bring that up? Because this coaching staff as a whole, even the guys that aren't here anymore, kind of felt like they would talk to their players through the media, and it kind of felt like what he was doing that here is almost a pat on the back to the, hey, thanks for making sure this stuff isn't getting to us anymore. Were you surprised he brought that up?
I wasn't surprised because I think the amount of talk out of the press conferences from the players, the fans, the media, everything has really been centered around the culture down in North Stadium. And that culture, I think, is a direct reflection of leadership, specifically the player leadership. And you go back, like you said, when Frost was playing, Coach Osborne and the Unity Council, everything that they had in place created it where was, yes, you want to play for the university, you want to play for your coaches, but you don't want to let the guy to your left or the guy to your right down. And some of it was tough love. Some of it was probably a little bit more physicality in practices and just getting your teammates to a level that they could handle whatever's going to come their way.
Lawrence Phillips is staying on the sideline staring at dudes.
Yeah, the Peter brothers saying enough's enough.
Right.
Whatever it was. But now, fast forward to this season, he's brought it up for the last 4 years that when we get to that point, I can't do it all. We can't police it. And if we're not having to do that, and now we are focusing on what we need to focus on as a coaching staff, we're going to be better. If the players are able to hold each other accountable and then focus on what they're supposed to be doing more often, we're going to be better. And
that's a great point. I didn't think about that. You're right. He did specifically mention when we get to that point, it's going to look a lot different.
And so I don't feel that it was forced. I don't feel like it was a veiled shot at anybody. I just think that he is, and the body language you talked about in the opening segment, you start to see it, and that's the reason. That could be the reason why.
That's a good point about saying you didn't feel like it was forced, because I don't think it was either. And I think a lot of that is because he has been so vocal that it's been an issue. And hasn't had an issue saying, hey, listen, we don't have guys policing themselves in this locker room right now. So I agree with you. I don't think it was forced at all. And it's, I wouldn't say refreshing, but it's nice to know that there is players being held accountable. Because I don't want to say it hasn't felt like that, but it's gotten to the point where we've heard, obviously, the Maurice Washington story and everything that went into that. And I really... It feels like there's guys that want to be told what to do also. They want leadership. They want guidance. They want to be held accountable. And I don't think it's necessarily felt like that before this season.
Well, you bring up Maurice Washington and the idea of, and coaches do this all the time, and it's a risk reward. But you go out on a limb for something, right?
Right.
And you put yourself on the line. But think about this: the farther out on that limb you go, the less secure that it is. And now all of a sudden, they don't have to go out on the limb. Players don't have to go out. They are all closer to that trunk where it's stable. The roots have now started to take hold a little bit more. And maybe this season we're going to start to see what that tree in this analogy is going to look like, and it's going to bear some fruit. I'll just go full on analogy.
and to double down on it, I think a lot of that trunk is Mark Whipple and Frost for the first time. And Coach Whipple even said that Coach Frost isn't going to be completely hands-off. But Coach Frost said, hey, listen, I'm taking my hands off this thing. Whipple's 100% in charge, and it's allowed me to go do other things. And hearing that reminds me of when they retooled that offensive line a year ago and the conversation he had about the conversation with Coach Austin and moving guys around and repiecing and retooling. And listen, that offensive line looked a whole lot different after that happened. Obviously, injuries piled up that kind of made them go back to the way things were. But there was talk Friday about guys playing multiple positions and Donovan Raiola making sure that day one looks like this at left guard, but the guy that was there is going to be at right tackle on Tuesday. So in case we get into a situation where this guy or that guy goes down, it's not we have to piece this together and try to get through the rest of the season type scenario.
Now, in that same sentence, I did pause, and it hit me a little bit because
that's the beauty of this job.
Scott Frost said, Raiola's doing what I want him to do. So it caught me a little bit because what I fall back on is, well, were the other coaches either A, not doing what you wanted to do on the offensive line, or is it still your plan type of thing? And so if it's the cross training still, if it's what he wants the line to look like, if that's what he meant by that, that's great. But it just stuck out to me.
Let me tell you what I took away from it. I think I was so involved in play calling and other duties that I didn't even realize I wasn't getting what I wanted from my offensive line. And think about everything that goes into a play calling preparation. It might even be, I don't want to call it impossible, but impossible to not, hey, I need to know what routes the wide receivers are running, and we're trying to run this bang 8 route while the running back went the wrong way, versus, oh yeah, there's 5 guys that need to make sure that Adrian Martinez is standing upright. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but as somebody that's been in that situation at a much lower level, it's very easy to get lost in play calling versus the most important aspect of offensive football is making sure, hey, the other 11 guys on the other side of the ball, not your back.
Well, and he's thinking about the play calling and not knowing what everyone's doing. On the sideline, the game's going on, and the defense is out there. Something he's thinking 5, 6, 7 plays. He's looking at his script. He's coming up with ways of what they're going to do on the next drive, he had no idea, and he's still taking in information, but we know where his head was. Well, now he can, and I want to see it. He'll put his footprint a little bit in that offensive line meeting on the sideline, right? Something happened, a little bit of a breakdown. Now they can talk. He's just not stuck right there. I wonder too, with Frost giving these coaches a little bit more freedom, even to the point where a couple weeks ago, a question came up and Frost said that Whipple, the question was, where's Whipple going to be during the games? And Frost's answer was, he can be wherever he wants. If he wants to be upstairs, he can be upstairs. If he wants to be down on the field, he can be down on the field. He's giving them that control.
Where would you like him to be? Do you have a preference on this? I know this has been kind of a hot topic. If you were a coordinator, would you rather him be on the field or would you rather him be a press box?
I'm not gonna answer it completely, because if he has guys up top that he trusts and can give him the information that he needs to make the best decisions for the team, I'm fine with it if he's down on the field. But if for him, he can,
bless you, Chancellor.
He can see everything and have the connection still and the technology and everything like that, I guess I'm fine. Either way. It's a non-answer, but in that part of it, it doesn't bother me, because I don't know. I guess I haven't gotten into that as far as other times. Where was he last year for Pitt? I know you know the answer.
He actually split time.
Okay. So my answer was perfect.
It is, but for me, if I'm Coach Frost and I'm taking my hands off, I want him upstairs, but I want the offensive coaches around him, the Mickey Josephs, the Donnie Riles, the Brian Applewhites of the world, to be enough an extension of myself and of Mark Whipple that they're on the field. And we've got headsets for a reason.
Yep.
Okay, I need you up there figuring out where we're going to be, like you said, 7 plays down the road. And I need these guys making sure that they're doing their job and putting their position, their players, their respective position in places to be successful. And he we talked about the leadership on this team, and he's, Coach Frost specifically said on Friday, hey, a lot of our leadership is coming from our toughest guys. It's very shocking to me, the guy that got hired from UCF 5 years later now has the tough guys running things in Lincoln. It's very shocking to me that it kind of feels like it's taken this long to get here, but when you were an offensive coordinator or a position coach for as long, and I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact this is only his 7th year going into head coaching. And it's easy to lose sight of that because he was the national coach of the year at UCF before he got here.
That's because the last 4 have felt like 14.
The pandemic didn't help, but yes, I totally agree. But it kind of feels like, and maybe this is what Trev Alberts was going for, you need to have your thumbprint on this entire team, not just the play call. And I went back recently and I watched the Oklahoma game from a year ago, and I watched the Ohio State game, because I think those were the 2 most pivotal games in the season, because it felt like they were a big fight field, right? And when you look at the play call, it was there. The execution at times was off. And that's not a pass to Frost, because it's his job to make sure those guys are ready. And I think that's more what we're going to see this year is, I think it's going to look a lot more buttoned up for 2 reasons. I think Mark Whipple's the right hire. I think Mickey Joseph is the right hire. I've talked about this. I've been to every Friday Night Lights other than the one during, obviously, when people weren't allowed in the stadium. And it felt rah-rah, hooray, we're all here for a show, blah, 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 blah. This year it felt like a business trip. And that was 100% of the way Mickey Joseph was conducting his group of guys on the field, and it felt contagious. Mark Whipple is going to have a bigger impact on results on the field. I think Mickey Joseph and the way he conducts himself in his room specifically is going to have a bigger impact on the locker room. And the leadership of tough guys, I think, is more of a direct reflection of Mickey Joseph than it is Scott Frost. And I think that's because, yes, Mickey is absolutely a player's coach, but he talked openly about ruling with an iron fist this year, and that is contagious. And I think we see a lot more of that outside of the wide receiver room because of those group of guys holding people to a higher expectation because they don't want to deal with Mickey Joseph during practice during the week. Update on Devin Drew, the former Iowa Western Reaver and Texas Tech Red Raider. He's not in Lincoln yet. Coach Frost said he would be here soon. I'm assuming he's probably going to get here today. If I had to take a guess based on the comments that our friend Brian Munson had with Devin Drew about maybe this weekend, I would be surprised if he's not in Lincoln by today. We probably won't see him at practice until later this week, if I had to guess. The biggest news, though, we've said all that in an hour to get to the point that it is Casey Thompson's job to lose, and I don't know if he did this to reassure fans, but Coach Frost brought up the thumb and brought up, more importantly, Casey Thompson's grip on the football and said it's looked as best as it has since he's been here. And I think that was a little reassuring to some Nebraska fans because seeing your starting quarterback walk around in a cast during the offseason, not exactly the most fan-friendly of views.
It doesn't give you that reassurance like, oh, great, here we go again. It's going to be something else. The excuses are already built in. So, if he's good to go, but was it 10 days ago or so, there was a video that just kind of dropped. He was out, not a passing camp, but just doing some work, and it looked good. And now if we're seeing that and no information had come out, I think it's almost more responsible of coach to say, hey, we're going to get asked about it anyway. Here's the situation. If he feels good about it, hey, giddy up.
I want to get more into this because we didn't even get into the special team stuff, and I want to pick your thoughts on that. It's 6:56 on a Monday morning. Fitz in for Damon, Jimmy Allen in for Gary. We appreciate you coming along this 4-hour journey with us we call Sharp and Betting in the Morning. Phone calls welcome this morning, 402-951-1620. I want to talk special teams and robots at restaurants when we come back here on 1620 The Zone. Two people at the station that I've never actually done a show with. I think Gary's ducking me. I think he's afraid of my infinite wisdom of sports. It's intimidating to him.
Well,
it's probably
he's pretty sharp.
He's probably the most knowledgeable human being I've ever met. But that's neither here nor there. I'm Jimmy Allen. That's Fitz. We're filling in for Gary and Damon this morning. Phone calls welcome 402-951-1620. You can get at the show at Sharp and Betting on Twitter as well. Give us your thoughts. We're breaking down Scott Frost's press conference from over the weekend. We didn't even really get to the good stuff. We talked about Casey Thompson a little bit in that thumb. Interesting point, and I totally agree with it. And I like that this coaching staff this year has seemed to put a little more of an emphasis on protecting guys and making sure injuries aren't piling up, because that's been, and specifically the running back room. And when you've got guys like Anthony Grant and Ramir Johnson talking about wanting to be effective and important on the special teams role, Coach Frost brought up that they don't do they had a live scrimmage on Saturday, but they don't do live scrimmage of special teams. And I look at that and I go, okay, it's basically an organized car wreck over and over again. I'm kind of okay with that, but I'm a little hesitant because this is a team that a year ago literally just fair caught every punt because they couldn't establish it. Now, Bill Busch is in this situation, and there's more of a hands-on approach during practice. Coach Frost even brought that up, that it feels different because of how much Bill Busch is actually able to do on the field versus a year ago where guys would kind of split off and do their own thing. Obviously, with Shimmy coming in and a lot of other guys, there's a different feel. I expect Trey Palmer to maybe not ever come off the field unless Nebraska doesn't touch the football. And who knows, he might even play safety at some point this year. Very surprised to hear that Anthony Grant may be that guy on kick returns because I expect him to be running back number one this year. Anybody that didn't get a chance to see New Mexico Military Academy last year, you missed out because he is special. No slight to Ramir Johnson. I expect him to see more of a Wan'Dale Robinson role this year, as like lining up in the slot and running back, but even more by design instead of by necessity. I would be amazed if at some point you don't see a majority of a two running back system on the field. Not necessarily an I formation, but a Ramir Johnson lined up at the slot with a Gabe Urban or an Anthony Grant in the backfield. Special teams in practice, though, do you think this is something that it's been such a struggle they should do in scrimmage, or is it, hey, listen, kickoff is the most violent part of football. Should we just leave that for Saturday?
In that same press conference, Frost said that as he talked to a couple guys coming off, leaving practice, whatever, several of them said that the hardest part of practice has been special. They're working.
They're refreshing to hear.
It is, but it's because it's not being overlooked, and we don't know to the extent that it was, even if it, overlooked, maybe not the right word, but the attention to probably wasn't given as much as it already is this season.
It's hard to without a designated coach for that position.
It really is, and the information going from an analyst to another coach, getting, and they're, this coach is worried about the tight ends, and this coach is worried about the offensive line, but now they're trying to set up their blocking schemes on kickoff return. Where do the
coming second hand?
Do you want the gunner? Yeah, and it's just being passed along. But now you have somebody down there working on it. I think, and I want to believe that when they're in that block of time in practice, that it's not a full-on scrimmage, but it's live as much as live can be. But
maybe 75% or something.
Yeah, but they don't need to run it, 20 times, and they also don't need just that one issue to occur, as you said, that choreographed, organized car wreck where
and there goes
somebody's just not quite paying attention, or just looks the wrong way, which happens all the time, or somebody says, hey, you know what, I'm going out there full speed, they want us to practice like that, and the guy turns and comes back and just gets blown up on a blind side, and it's out for some odd reason. I just think that if they feel that they don't need to do that because they're getting it done the other days in practice and in other ways, I'm perfectly fine with that. Plus, we already know that guys that are going to be starters on offense and defense have said out loud that they're on certain coverages.
We want
to be there. There's a pride. It's that bigger discussion, but it's that pride, and it really does go back to the self-accountability and these players now saying, you know what, it wasn't where we wanted it last year, special teams, let me step in and do it. And we all know this story. As soon as he got here, Mickey Joseph talked about it at LSU. His guys and him were in those meetings for special teams, and he was taking as many notes and learning as much as the coaches as the players were. And until that special teams coach said, these players, you don't need to be here anymore, they were there because he wanted them to know exactly what they needed to do. And if that's the type of mentality that's down there right now, and they're getting that done, I'm perfectly fine with it. And I think we're going to see improvement.
I think for a lot of people, the most, I don't know, shocking, but news was how quickly they listed Casey Thompson as a starter. For me, it was Coach Frost's admiration for Alante Brown, and his name has been brought up by Coach Joseph, by Coach Applewhite, unsolicited, and has been brought up several times as the guy that's been a leader on the field. But Coach Frost specifically said he's the leader in that wide receiver. For a guy that hasn't seen as much playing time as maybe some of the guys like an Omar Manning, like an Oliver Martin, were you surprised to hear that? And we just talked about special teams. He's been a guy that's been on kick return. Does that tell you he might not be as involved in the kick return game this year and might be a little more involved in running routes this season?
You hope so. I think, we go back to what we know from Frost's tenure at Oregon, stuff like that. We always bring up that double R position.
Right.
And I see that as a perfect place for Alante Brown.
Because if we're talking about ceiling in that room, it's probably Trey Palmer one, but I think Alante Brown is a very close second there. If you're just talking about athletic ability.
Well, and you can help me with it. And maybe it was the Oklahoma game. There was a few moments where when Alante Brown got the ball in his hands in a real game situation, he made 4 or 5 guys miss.
Yeah.
And he got positive yardage. He's one of those that you have to find a way to get him the ball in some certain situations, and that's why Whipple is the right guy, because that's where he goes now. With Alante Brown, you said it earlier, he was a quarterback through high school. He's now really learning the position in a way, and it takes a little bit longer. Think about Jamari Butler as another example. He stopped playing football in 7th grade, didn't pick it up again until his junior year, and now it's starting to come along. People thought maybe it might be a little bit sooner, but it takes some time. You got to reacclimate yourself and get to that level. again, going back to what you originally asked me, if Alante Brown not being the guy on one of the return units translates to him catching more passes or running more routes and being on the field more consistently, that's a great situation for Nebraska.
There were times, and it seemed to be the rare times that Nebraska had a lead, they would run that wide receiver jet motion with an option. They ran a lot with Xavier Betts. Obviously, he's not on the team anymore, but it really surprised me that wasn't more of a Alante Brown thing, because as a guy that played quarterback and really understood how the option and the off-speed worked, it really surprised me it wasn't number 4 out there in those situations. And I want to see him run routes this year, and I want to see him catch some passes, but if they're going to incorporate the option game, the speed option, the jet sweep option, or just a bubble screen or whatever it may be, I really hope he's that guy, because like you just said, if he gets the ball in his hand out in space, he's very dynamic, maybe the most dynamic in that entire room. And if there's going to be an emphasis on attention to detail and putting guys in the best position this year, I'm not saying he can't run routes, but I think things like that are where he's more equipped. Oh, and by the way, he could probably throw it a little bit too. If you get yourself in a situation where, hey, we need a big splash play, we trust the guys in the room a little more than we did a year ago, let's get a little bit creative here. And I think this coaching staff, up until this point, have sometimes been over creative to a detriment, but it's okay in small doses. Don't outcoach yourself. Don't be cute. Speaking of cute, Jimmy Allen fits in for Gary Sharp and Damon Benning this morning. We'll be right back talking about robots at restaurants, self-checkouts. Is it a problem in America? We'd love your thoughts. 402-951-1620. The beautiful Chance Oliver producing this joint. We'll be right back on 1620 Zone.
Progressive knows that most people don't get too excited. Using a Phillips screwdriver planted in Hamala, bis sie Vincents. So, planted in Hamala, bis sie Vincents.
This sounds like another language to me. You can start talking. You can cut me off. You have the ability to shut my microphone off.
Well, it was too late.
Okay, well, it is perfect timing. Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp. Fitz on the Church of the Corn podcast in for David Benning this morning. You can email the show at COliver at NRG Media, because we don't have real email accounts because we don't really work here. On the Equitable Bank inbox this morning, you can tweet us at the JTech on the JTech Construction Zone Twitter feed at Sharp and Benning. We will answer all of your questions that you have and get to any of the topics you want to talk about. But specifically, I want to talk about robots right now, because last night I went out to dinner, and that's why we played the Jetsons. I got food to go at a local restaurant in South Omaha, and just by my foot, I looked down. The robot goes by me, and it has 3 trays on it with food, and it's taking it to the host stand. Are you okay with? You're a little bit of an older gentleman, the older statesman in the room. You seem very tech savvy. You couldn't figure out how to use your camera on your iPad, but that's neither here nor there. Part of me loves self-checkout because I don't like dealing with people a whole lot, but the other part of me is like, I don't want people to lose their jobs. And I also hate when they malfunction. I gotta wait for somebody to come over. There's not somebody ready to go. The robot at the restaurant thing was sweet, and I think it's game over if they find a way to put a keg on it, and you can just it'll just come around to you, and you can swipe your card for a beer. That might be that. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this on air, and I need to patent this idea. But
Put that in my garage today.
how much are you okay with changes? Would you rather would you rather have somebody come up and say, "Hi, I'm Denise. I'm going to be taking care of you tonight. What would you like to drink?" Or do you want just a robot to come up and swipe your card and give you a beer?
It's a tough question on a Monday morning
Right.
at 7:50.
I should have told you should have Red Bull.
I don't know, the self-checkout part, for example, I get it, and efficiency. I think part of that idea, I'm going to bring this back around to the robot, part of that idea was, hey, I had to come in, I got a 6-pack of beer.
Do you think the robot would help you get your microphone closer to your mouth? There you go. I got you, buddy. Good.
So now I'm getting the end of Jimmy's frustration chance over not turning his mic off. So now I've got to. Wow. Anyway, the idea there, a couple of items going through the self-checkout. It harkens back to the 10 items or less, and then 10 items or less. The person that goes through with 2 cards and writes a check. I think in certain
Buy some lottery tickets on the way.
in certain doses, and things are good. If it's the robot, and you know going in that that's kind of what it's going to be, I think it can be fun. I don't know. There's something about some human interaction. There's something
It's probably
about
good for the soul.
being to talk about it. You know, who does somebody complain to when, you know, they didn't want the dressing on the salad, they wanted it on the side? Is the robot going to take this in? I don't care. You know, in a
CPU is
laser.
a neural net processor, a learning computer. The more contact I have with humans, the more I learn.
Get to the chopper! You'll start to notice the more you do radio, you'll have people that think they're entitled to get shout-outs for some reason. So shout out to Chuck Mulligan for telling me about the Berea pizza. For anybody that's been seeing the giant Mexican pizzas trending on Twitter or Facebook, that's what we got last night. But shout out to Chuck. You're important to me, I guess.
I don't know. It's going back. It's a robot vacuum cleaner, right? That's really what it is. The technology's there. Why not utilize it? I know it's taller. It's got a tray.
So I sat there and I went and shout out to the restaurant because it was packed. It only took me about 20 minutes to get the food. But like I spent the entire 20 minutes sitting there watching.
Having a conversation with the robot?
No, not even having a conversation. Like
trying to have a conversation.
Waiting
with
to
the
see if
robot.
it ran somebody over, and like the frustration. Like this thing was sweet though. Like it literally like veered off every time and kind of found its way, and it like set on it where it was going. It was. I was probably way too impressed for somebody that works in technology during the day.
What do you think something like that costs?
Honestly, I think it's probably affordable. Like, because a friend of mine, Josh, I tweeted about it, waited and was like, we've been looking, because he works at a restaurant down Lincoln, he's like, we've been looking at getting one of these, how did it work, blah, 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 blah. So I'm assuming it's pretty affordable, and it seems to be there's a market out there for it. And almost everything I got was, oh, these things are going to start taking people's jobs. All this thing was doing was running food. So, I mean, there was waitresses at the table. If it would meet the waitresses there, they would dispense it, or it was just taking it to the host stand. By the way, for somebody that worked in restaurants for 8 years, nobody wants that job anymore. So I'm just throwing that out there.
It goes back to everything with technology. Can you more efficiently do your job with the assistance of the technology? It's not the technology doing the job for you.
Right.
But
Which is where some people have beef with self-checkout.
If I'm working and I happen to be at this table and that robot is going to meet me at the other table and I take the food off for them and it's just a way of getting it to me, great. Hey, no, it doesn't sound like a bad deal to me.
Let us know your favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger quotes at Sharp and Benning on Twitter. We'll read them on air. We'll make Chance Oliver do it in Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice. Jimmy Allen in for Gary, Fitz in for David Benning this morning. The NFL did their Hall of Fame ceremony this year. We're going to give you our take on the class and some of the stories that we heard this year. Absolutely was blown away that Dick Vermeil didn't cry. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more when we come back here on 1620. Couldn't come up with this then.
Well, you wanted the Jetsons, right?
That was the segment before that.
Well, you know, Rosie the robot.
I need you to catch up.
No.
That's what I need, Chance.
Fine. Chance, I have that album.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a vinyl. It's called a record.
Sticks?
So it's, yeah. Mr. Robot.
Is that like
It's bigger than a compact, probably about the size of like medium pizza. I don't know.
Is that the CD version of the Laserdisc?
You youngins, I'll tell you what. Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp. Fitz.
Youngin brought up the Laserdisc.
How about you? Fitz, and now he's saying he has a vinyl record.
I know.
And I hate Fitz in for David Benning. We are talking futuristic things here on 1620 The Zone this morning. But we're going to take a step back in time, talk about the Hall of Fame this weekend in the NFL. Did you have a favorite moment from the ceremony?
Yeah, there's actually I think a little bit of a theme. And we know that they're always going to thank people and stuff like that, but the lot more emotional, I think, in terms of why they were thanking some people in unfortunate circumstances. Kind of what it came down to for me. You know, fathers and players that weren't with us anymore.
Right.
Brian's son, for example, just those human moments, and just the idea of kind of a theme of just overall kindness.
I'm not a big crier, but when Brian Young started talking about his son Kobe that wasn't there and his loss to cancer, I was like, ooh, it was cutting onions.
Well, and when you're a parent, as both of us are,
Right.
that stuff. Like I
think it hits me a little harder now.
And
Yeah,
I
for
always
sure.
I joke around now too. It's like you watch College Game Day, and Tom Rinaldi would run his comments, and you're getting jacked up for a football game in 45 minutes. Next thing you know, you're bawling in your chair because of the emotional segment that they show.
yeah.
I mean, it just hits you different.
And I think as I get older, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this as Zach weighs in and lets us know that you are probably the oldest person he knows. For your comment about vinyl. But with Tony Baselli, a lot of people had a problem getting in, which I was kind of surprised about. Started talking about his dad and how much he pushed him, and just thinking about my father getting older and maybe not being around and stuff like that. I really think we need to do a better job, especially in Dick Vermeil's case, of maybe getting these guys in sooner if they're bona fide Hall of Famers, which I think Dick Vermeil absolutely is, because how many guys that he mentioned couldn't be here because of age, couldn't be here because of health reasons, is no longer with us and stuff, and he finished it, and the guy has cried about everything his entire career. The fact that he didn't shed one tear was incredibly impressive. But when he started talking, when he ran down, hey, now that I'm here, I can't wait to see Mike Holmgren and Marty Schottenheimer and Mike Shanahan and Tom Coughlin get in. And Tom Coughlin, obviously, in attendance, probably a lot of the reason was brought up several times in this Hall of Fame. Obviously, Tony Baselli brought him up as well because he played under Coughlin and stuff. Definitely a Hall of Famer, and I don't understand what we're waiting for. And I know they try to keep classes small to make it more, give more of a sentiment feel and an intimate feel. But it's one of those things that nobody wants to go in the Hall of Fame after they're dead because they don't get to enjoy. And there's certain people that are very integral into these guys getting in that aren't going to be able to attend because they are 90 plus years old. And one of the gentlemen drove 91 years old, drove from L.A. to be in Canton for Dick Vermeil's speech, and that's obviously a very rare situation. But there were a couple of people that Tony Baselli brought up that aren't Hall of Famers that I think should absolutely get in. I think Fred Taylor should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame at some point. Maybe not Mark Brunell. I'm kind of on the fence about that, but I wouldn't hate it if he got in. I don't think he necessarily has the accolades to be a Hall of Famer, but for what he did, taking over an expansion franchise and the success he had, and really was the face of that franchise from their inception until he decided to walk away. I wouldn't hate it, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with it. I think Mark Brunell is one of those guys that's definitely to me.
When you ask kind of what stuck out, number one, Tony Baselli, you don't realize that he only played 7 seasons.
Right.
Now I know that, on an offensive line.
That's a long time in the NFL, though.
It really is, but you kind of envision in your mind that it was longer. 95 to 2002 was really where, and then it was a short stint with the Texans. Crafted a lot of players. But the big thing for me, and you mentioned it, Dick Vermeil said it, Baselli said it. It seemed, and maybe I'm just not quite remembering correctly. It seemed like there was more lobbying.
Agreed.
Players
No, I agree.
to get into the Hall of Fame, coaches to get in, whomever it might be this season than I've seen maybe in the past. Now it could be the personality of players when you've got a cornerback or a wide receiver that spent their career with the attention on them, a Michael Irvin, a Dion, guys like that.
Sure.
They're flamboyant. They're what their message is good. They go through and they thank people, but they're I guess in that regard it seems a little bit different this year than in the past. And I guess I'm glad I'm not the only one that kind of thought that. Which there's nothing wrong with it.
No, I loved it.
There's nothing wrong with it because it almost kind of keeps going back to the idea that there's been a push to speed up the process. There's been a push to open it up because they've got these rules and they've got these under. Well, if we have one of these this year, we can't have this person. We can't, like, you know what? Just decide who is deserving of it and let's get it done.
Right, and sooner rather than later. I think that's important. Maybe the 1 or 1A that I was the most excited about, Richard Seymour. I loved his story about, he knew to the date when his very first football practice was, and talked about his mother driving him there and forcing him to get out of the car because he didn't even want to get out and play, and I thought that was very cool. A lot of cool aspects of his story. Him and his wife were high school sweethearts, and in a day and age where Tinder and Bumble and whatever else was so easy, and divorce is so rampant, to hear that, and she looked more excited and happy for him than he was, and had a hard time keeping it together. One of the thing that didn't surprise me at all about Richard Seymour's story is the fact that he brought up having to go get coffee and donuts and carry pads for the veterans, but took that time to use that as a learning tool. And there's so much that goes into, listen, is hazing necessarily a good thing? Probably not. But there's certain aspects to being a rookie and carrying pads and getting brought into a brotherhood that I think people lose sight of the value in. Richard Seymour, did he probably want to go get donuts at 4:30 in the morning? Chance Oliver can't even get here before 5:45. So obviously you guys don't really appreciate the aspect of showing up early. But he saw the
without
value.
donuts.
And without donuts.
I was bar hopping, bro.
Were you really last night?
Not last night, Saturday. It was a long day on Sunday.
Recovery? A
Yeah.
donut might have helped you get there. Might have helped me too.
It might. All right.
Was the weirdest part of the entire ceremony Robert Kraft blowing Richard Seymour a kiss, though? It was very odd. Like I don't think I've ever seen a 96-year-old man blow a kiss. That wasn't a thing.
You've told us some stories. I do not believe you. But anyway,
Maybe
Kraft's kind of a weird, he's
No.
eccentric in a way. I don't know. It's just, instead of you do a wave, maybe he does a little bit of a salute, but yeah.
the blowing the kiss thing, like, I don't know.
It's awkward. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, if you're not related, I don't know. I'm out on that. But
At least Richard Seymour didn't start just reaching in there trying to
pocketing
grab
it.
Like
He pocketed it.
Puts it in his pocket.
the one thing in the midst of Brady leaving New England and going down to Tampa Bay, and it's seeming like some guys on the offensive side of the ball, maybe not the biggest fan of the way Belichick runs practice and stuff, how adamant his defensive players are about how happy they were to play for him. And making sure that he mentioned the guys that he played side and mentioned that they had a young quarterback that they had to drag through some things. Very cool moment. And I think probably gave some Patriots fans maybe a sigh of relief that maybe he can get this thing turned around without Tom Brady.
Well, think about Boselli bringing up Tom Coughlin and thanking him and appreciating it. Richard Seymour valuing Bill Belichick. The thing is, we just lamented how these things need to be done sooner, but there's also a little bit of credence that goes to the longer you are away from something, you start kind of remembering how things were
Good point.
a little bit. But I think those guys now value what those coaches did for them and how they did it. We all know Tom Coughlin is a hard ass. Wants it done his way. What's that?
You can't say that. I'm
No,
just
Tom Coughlin wore a hard hat in practice. What do you think I said?
You can say ass. It's not good.
I bet it. Oh, so Tom Coughlin was a hard ass. It's okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. And very particular on certain things, but it also breeds some success. You can go through these lists of coaches, Bill Parcells,
Sure.
things like that. There's just it's not a well that was then, this is now type of thing. It's just sometimes that tough love goes back to Seymour getting donuts, stuff like that. It always comes down to the person's position and their mental ability to expect something on the other side or whatever it is on how that situation goes. So if he was willing participant and valued, hey, you know what, this just gives me more time with these guys and I'm going to learn as much as I can as quick as I can because I want to be out on the field, whatever it is. Who's to say that's wrong because they were perfectly fine.
And the fact that he was the number 6 overall pick and was still willing to be that humble about it is pretty impressive, and probably a lot of the reason Richard Seymour will be forever enshrined in Canton now. And then to my favorite part of the entire ceremony, obviously as a 49ers fan, this one's a little special for me. The number 30 49er inducted into the Hall of Fame in Bryant Young. He was the reason I'm a 49ers fan is because of Jerry Rice. And flip side of that, Bryant Young was my guy. And I was 6 when they beat the Chargers. My first 2 memories as a football fan is the 94 win over Miami and then the Chargers 49ers Super Bowl. And I remember in 98 watching the Carolina game the week after he broke his leg because back then you didn't get every game on TV and you kind of got what you had to deal with. But the commentators talking about how bad the leg break was, the talk about him maybe never even be able to walk again. And at 8 years old, I was crushed. That was my guy, you know what I mean? And him and Chris Dolman later kind of became my favorite 2 defenders. But that's a moment that will forever stick with me. I always remember where I was when Mark McGuire broke the record and where I was when I found that Bryant Young broke his leg. I don't know why. I can tell you exactly what I was doing at those 2 moments. But we kind of already talked about it. Him bringing up his son, but one of the things that he also talked about before he even got to Kobe was how many people it took for him to be around him to make him a successful man. There's that age-old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I think we need to tweak that and make that it takes a village to make somebody successful, because very rarely do people get there on their own. And this is a guy that talked about people helping him at 26, 28, 30 years of age, and in a time where we're taking such a toll on mental health and trying to make sure it gets talked about, it's really nice to see guys. Bryant Young looks like he can suit up today and still play. And talking about how it took this person and that person and Coach Mariucci and just listing a list of guys to even get him to be a starter in the NFL. Not even talking about a Hall of Fame career, before he was even probably the best defensive tackle in the NFL at one point. He made sure that it goes back to this class maybe as a whole, made sure they gave recognition where recognition was deserved.
Yeah, it was obviously it's about them, but they recognize and understand that it's not just them. And,
right.
Parents, little league coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, whatever it is, a coach in college says, you know what, I really think you're going to serve yourself better if you go to this position, right? And now that is the catalyst that pushes somebody into a career, whatever it is. The other part of that, though, and because we see it all the time, the individual that's getting that help has to be willing to receive it.
Agree.
And if you
being coachable is a skill.
If you push back, it really is. If you push back, if you fight it, if you think that you know more, and there's a lot of that comes with maturity. We've seen guys go out of college and it takes them a few years into the league, and then when it finally clicks, like now, their understanding, their empathy, their maturity, and their ability all click at the same time, and now there they go. They're off and running. So, but yeah, valuing what people can do for you and accepting that, it was huge. And
I know you work with youth and you coach young kids sometimes too, and I think you can probably relate to the story. I was coaching 13-year-old football at Burke a couple of years ago, and we had a kid played quarterback, was electric, could make kids miss, was the fastest kid on the team. Obviously, it's usually when you play quarterback at that age, we would always make the kids put away the pads and stuff and build work ethic and stuff, and he would literally go out of his way to not do it, right? And I had to pull him aside and say, hey, listen, you're playing quarterback, right? Well, yeah. Do you feel like you're too good to pick up these pads? And he said, well, no, I just, those guys do, this, and just kind of gave him excuse after excuse. And I said, okay, well, what if they look at that and say, well, he's not willing to pick up pads, why am I going to block him? And he kind of had that aha moment of, oh, it's not about picking up pads, it's about being a part of a team. And I think it's certain moments like that where you're either going to know if you have somebody that's going to sink or swim in that situation, because if it's continued behavior, they don't want to be a part of the team, and it is about them, it's never going to work out. But guys like Richard Seymour, guys like guys like Brian Young kind of seemed to understood, hey, I had a lot of talent to get here, but it's not just me that pulled this wagon this far. Dick Vermeil, were you surprised that Kurt Warner didn't induct Dick Vermeil? Because I thought that was going to be a for sure thing.
A little bit. When they announced early on who that is, at that moment, like, kind of a surprise.
Right.
You connect those two.
I got you a movie title credit, bro. Like, at least give him.
The thing for me that kind of surprised me, you almost forget that
Dick Vermeil's 900 years old.
that he coached it was the head coach of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so what comes back
because of the greatest show on turf. Yeah.
And then but movie and the Invincible movie, you kind of start going to like, oh yeah, back, but we weren't seeing all those games,
Right.
stuff like that. But
Some of us weren't even.
he was 3 years older than you. That's it. That's it. 3 years older. Maybe it's the gray hair. Maybe it's the limping with both legs. Whatever it might be. But he's been around a long time. But it really does come back to that greatest show on turf. And then he kind of almost rejuvenated himself a little bit, and then brought teams back.
Sure. Just in Kansas City.
Yeah.
The one thing that I learned from this that I didn't know is that he was the first ever assigned special teams coach in the NFL, and I thought that was pretty cool. Like and this is why I enjoy the Hall of Fame, is because of, as a younger fan, there's certain things about, and we're starting to get to my generation of guys where it's guys that I watched or whatever, but you didn't know, and learning that was very cool for me, because it's kind of like, okay, this is why this guy's here, is because he's a trendsetter. He made it important enough that became an aspect that needed to be addressed on the football field. He made sure, and just the theme of this class, he thanked the guy that hired him as a high school head coach. Like, he remembered the principal that hired him at the high school and thanked the guy that hired him at UCLA and told the entire story. He even gave a shout out to ABC and CBS, which I'm sure ESPN loved, for giving him the ability to broadcast game, and talked about being able to be in the locker room with Don Shula talking and Tom Coughlin. He even brought up Tom Osborne, which I thought was very cool, because I remembered him doing college games, but I didn't remember it at that time period. So that was awesome to hear. My favorite moment that touched me the most in this whole thing, like I said, was Brian Young talking about his son Kobe. But my second favorite moment was when Dick Vermeil brought up his wife, and everybody in the crowd that played for him or was associated stood up and clapped for her, which was very cool in my opinion. And we went out this weekend, and I kind of brought every week we had an after-hours Church of the Corn outing, and I invited everybody's significant other, because when you have somebody in a time-consuming job, I don't think people appreciate enough, whether it be man or woman, how much time is taken away from their family. And it's very cool that it seemed like everybody in that crowd understood how important Dick Vermeil's wife was into the role that he played.
Well, and it's, the idea of, he's picked up the family. They go to training camps on, back at that time, they would go to universities and just be away, for months at a time.
Right. I think Philadelphia specifically, or the Eagles specifically, went to Penn State.
Yeah. And
back then.
So being a single parent for those times, right? But but still supporting and still, and there was
unwavering too.
Yeah, and we're with the Invincible movie, you see some of that again in a movie setting, but just the willingness to be a willing participant like that, but support, because it wasn't all the best situation. You're gonna get fired, you're gonna get demoted, you're gonna
you have to move.
Yeah, and for him to recognize it and say, you know what, I've got the football mind and I can do this, but here's what here's the person that's been holding me up, has been pushing me, and probably saying, you know what, yeah, go try for that job, because you'd be really good.
When they make the movie about the Church of the Corn podcast, who do you want to play you? You got anybody?
Olaf.
My niece saw a picture of me in high school with hair, and she told me I looked like Olaf at the wedding in Frozen, so I appreciate that. Chance, do you know who you'd like to play you in a movie?
Who would I like to play me in a movie?
Jack Black?
Yeah, I would like I would like Jack Black to play like old grizzled, fed up with the world Chance, and then for young Chance,
You at 5:55 this morning.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Then, I guess for like the young Chance, I guess if we could time travel, like young Chris Farley.
Nice. I like that. Okay. I'll think about my answer when we come back. We're talking about how the Browns are an absolute dumpster fire as well. Another Brown trying to get out of Cleveland. Apparently, Fitz wants to be Kevin James when he grows up. Time on a Monday. It is 7:49. Oh, it's Kevin James play Chance? Okay. 7:49 on Monday. Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp. Fitz from the Church of the Corn in for Damon. We'll be here with you all morning. Phone calls 402-951-1620. We'll talk Cleveland Browns football when we come back around 1620 The Zone.
All right, so we are going to attempt to make at least these islands that you can see in the mini map right now. We're still quite a ways away, as you can see, but we're going to give it a shot. We still got 59% of our fuel, so I feel we might be able to make these islands. This podcast we're listening to, the two normal hosts are out, so I'm not familiar with these two guys. One guy seems to be much louder than the other guy. I think we'll keep going with it for now. We're talking about more national stuff in the next couple segments. I know it's a lot of Nebraska talk for all the millions of people who are watching this that aren't Nebraska fans, but we'll keep going with the Sharp and Benning show with their two guest hosts today on Monday, August 8th.
Sharp and Benning in the morning on 1620 The Zone, 1620thezone.com, and the 1620 The Zone app.
Fitz, I know you're new to the game, but you can always tell when Chance is starting to feel it because the music starts to F. Reminds me of Drew Carey.
I was going to say, was that another person to play him, or is this where I didn't know
Oh, yeah.
on that team?
Dude, he looks like I'm not saying I do, but like have you seen Drew Carey with his like quarantine beard?
He looks like Tim Allen from the Santa Claus movies.
I think he even looks like.
Do you think he purposely tries to look older on The Price is Right, though? I think that's an F.
Maybe.
I don't think he looks that old. I think he dyes his hair green.
He kind of looks like game show Jeff Bridges with the beard.
I'll take that.
Glued on. I mean, it's just odd.
It looks like an attempt to look older, and it's weird. Speaking of dumpster fires and the reason Chances playing that song, Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp, Fitz in for David Benning this morning on Sharp and Benning in the morning. It just seems like it's something every day with the Cleveland Browns. It comes out last night that in the last year of his deal, Kareem Hunt is asked to be traded, and you've got obviously everything with Deshaun Watson, and that's been taught that ad nauseum. We don't have to go into that. And the NFL wanting him to sit out another year despite his current 6-game suspension. But remembering back to just a few months ago with Jarvis Landry, who since he got to Cleveland was really the voice of that locker room after his stint in Miami when he showed up. He was really the Cleveland Browns for those 3 seasons. Even with a guy as vocal as Baker Mayfield in that locker room, it was really Jarvis Landry's locker room. All the Odell Beckham stuff, and now Kareem Hunt, a guy who a lot of people thought might end up being blacklisted after everything that happened in that hotel hallway, and his leave of absence from Kansas City. Didn't know if he was going to be welcomed back by the NFL. Finds a home in Cleveland. Does it surprise you that things are bad enough to where a guy who might not even have been able to play football just a couple years ago is trying to get out of the only franchise that was willing to give him a contract, despite having a year left on his deal?
No, not surprised.
Because it's Cleveland?
Partly because it's
Okay.
Cleveland. The ownership, you can find more instances of just, if you want to use an NCAA term, lack of institutional control for the Cleveland Browns, and it's that idea they just can't get out of their own way. And it looked promising a couple of years ago, and now they essentially pushed Baker Mayfield out of town and
Which is astonishing.
And knowing who they were bringing in and
Right.
what was hanging over that dark cloud, I think for me the question becomes with Kareem Hunt, between his agent, himself, his team, do they see, which is probably pretty obvious, the writing on the wall that hey, if I get traded now, I've got a little bit of value, I've got less wear and tear. Let me go and see what I can get, versus the other side would be, hey, stay, have a really good year, and then go get that next contract. But where is the money coming from? The Cleveland Browns have to, at some point in time, they're going to have to pay Chubb, they're going to have to pay other guys, but they've got $6 billion guaranteed for Deshaun Watson. Why wouldn't you want to get out before it just...
And I think a lot of it is running back in the last year of his contract, and he said he either wants a renewed deal or he wants out. Very much emphasizing, I want out of this deal. And it just feels like with this franchise, it's a little surprising you haven't heard more from Myles Garrett about maybe wanting to go somewhere else, but it just seems like any star that they can attract, whether sometimes it seems to be later in their life or somebody in the draft that they just completely whiff on, just hate their time in Cleveland. And Kareem's in the final year of a 2-year deal, $12 million guaranteed, and has just completely missed the last 2 practices because of this issue. You know who I feel for in this whole thing, though? Is Kevin Stefanski, because it feels like he's being asked the questions that should be coming down from management within the franchise. And with all these guys leaving, it just feels like it's a matter of time before his name's on the chopping block as well. They being Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, have been a very viable duo in Cleveland this year. It kind of feels like if Kareem Hunt leaves, it's only going to be a matter of time before Nick Chubb's asking to leave as well.
It's that lack of stability that creates a problem for Stefanski, like you said. I mean, who's he gonna go to? And now the product on the field is gonna suffer because he doesn't have the tools that he needs. But the ownership there, it goes right back to that leadership, how they've spent
or lack thereof.
Yes, and how they've spent their money, who they've spent their money on. They do all these big splashes, versus a team that's willing to, you know what, let's take 4 or 5 guys at a little bit lower rate, and they may not be the best players right now, but they get them into their system, they work, and now all of a sudden that team's more successful. You kind of feel you want Cleveland. It's kind of more fun. But you and I can go back to the days when they were competing. They were fun to watch. They had the dog pound, all that stuff.
And Cleveland's fan base is a lot of fun.
Yeah, but right now it's tough, and nobody wants to be a part of it. Kareem Hunt included.
They call it the mistake by the lake for a reason. Hey, it's been 8 days since we lost Bill Russell. It's 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. We're going to talk about his career, his legacy on the previous generation of basketball players, and a whole lot more. We come back at Sharp and Betting in the morning.
Something you probably do know. Progressive can not only offer you a great price.
Betting in the morning, Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp. Fitz, the Church of the Corn, and for David Betting this morning. Thank you for joining us here on 1620 The Zone, 1620 The Zone app, or 1620thezone.com. Remember, however you listen, it is still AM radio. Chance Oliver sitting atop his perch in his ivory tower, as he always does here inside the 1620 The Zone studios. It has been 8 days since we lost the legendary, the great Bill Russell. And the more and more that I learn about his life, the more intrigued I am by the man. Obviously, when you talk about 11 championships, the career speaks for itself. But at the time that he was doing it, and the level of class in which he handled himself is the most impressive thing to me. And then I started to think about players that I respect, the players that I got to see. And when you're talking about my time in the NBA is probably at the tail end of Michael Jordan, right? Your microphone's off, is it? It's on. Yes, I played a stint in the NBA. No, but my time as an NBA fan, my favorite series of all time is the Sonics and the Bulls in the NBA Finals. And that's really when I started to get into the NBA, and from there on. Obviously, growing up, I was a huge fan of Kobe and everything he brought to the game. And I started to think about interactions, because I don't really remember seeing Bill Russell around the game a lot, other than when, obviously, the NBA Finals MVP trophy was named after him, and deservingly so. And we're going to talk about that with Tim Duncan. But I started looking up interactions with Bill Russell, and the first one that came up, Chance, do you have the video ready for Kobe? Is this interaction with Kobe Bryant? And I want people to listen to it. I'm going to give my thoughts because I heard it first and then I saw it about this interaction. Go ahead, Chance. So when I heard this, and that was obviously Kobe Bryant talking to the late great Bill Russell, and when I heard this, it kind of sounded like Kobe was kind of dismissing the conversation, which was a little disheartening to me. And then I watched the video, and that couldn't have been farther from the truth. He was so awestruck to be talking. This is Kobe Bryant talking to Bill Russell that he literally couldn't look him in the eyes, smiling ear to ear. He couldn't have a bigger grin on his face, and he literally was so happy to be a part of the conversation he couldn't contain himself. And watching, you can see that. So hopefully, if you took away what I took away, go back and watch it because that wasn't the case. He couldn't have been smiling any harder if he tried. And then at the end of the video, you kind of heard it there, but they hug. Kobe Bryant couldn't have squeezed him any harder if he tried. And obviously the comment, I couldn't be more proud of you if you were my own son, really hit home for him. I absolutely love the part about I watch players to try to figure out their agenda and what's driving them. Because I didn't realize it, but I do that too in basketball specifically. And I think because there's so many one-on-one situations, you see guys go after other players, and maybe more of the greats. Kevin Durant in today's game maybe does it more than anybody, but it seems like NBA players, the great ones, give themselves a little bit of chalkboard material when they go into games. And Kobe, maybe the best to ever do that, maybe other than Michael Jordan.
I was going to say Jordan is, I mean, that was, you've heard stories that he almost kind of makes stuff up. And I
not even almost did.
There was
several games.
The last dance, yeah. Some really cool parts about that. But you don't have to necessarily have that agenda. And Bill Russell, but he would look, say, okay, and it was partly agenda, like what are they trying to do for themselves, and what are they going to repeatedly do? So some of those habits and stuff like that. But he just kind of knew, because it was almost, he had this idea that if the more this person's into their own head, it's going to be easier to just kind of crack and kind of figure that out. Yeah, and got after it. But Bill, he was a little bit of a, I'm going to use the term late bloomer, right? He didn't make his basketball team right away. You can compare that to the Jordan story, right? Jordan made the junior varsity team, which just fully cut, but Bill Russell did not hit his stride. The only scholarship offer he had was the University of San Francisco.
Worked out well for them,
and it
two
really
national
did.
championships.
And it did. And you kind of look at where basketball was at that time, and on the basketball side of it, you've got UCLA with Wooden, you've got Kareem, Bill Walton, and all of that, and then you had Bill Russell, who was for the University of San Francisco, kind of out of nowhere. Look what he was able to do for the team, right? And then
it's crazy when you think about like that situation and Scottie Pippen playing in Central Arkansas, and how some of these guys just, like you said, being late bloomers, basically fell into these coaches' laps in this sport.
Well, it's something that you have to be able to identify, and somebody was doing their job. Now, identifying a 7-footer that can run the court and rebound at the rate that he was, what he averaged, like 27 rebounds a game,
the blocks
right around that. Yeah, I mean that's not that hard. I think I could probably do that, but you've got to be willing to go and look. But and then when he gets to Boston, Boston was the epicenter of basketball for a long, long time. But going back to what you originally started, and the value that you can hear Kobe was putting on him in that interaction is that he just represented the game perfectly,
on and off the court.
Exactly right, on and off the court.
In post-Vietnam America, in the middle of civil rights movements and all of that, he stood up for injustice and people of the African American culture, but conducted himself in a way on the court that he only demanded respect, and it didn't matter what color you were, and then made it a point to be a part of everything going on in the community outside of basketball as well.
And if you live and work and portray yourself in the manner that you are standing up for, it's
Easy to
sure
do.
a lot easier to get behind that, trust that, and want to be right in line. And that's what he was doing. And he stood up next to Martin Luther King during speeches. He was present, and not just in the moment, not just in that time period. He was present, and he was in line to stand up for what he believed in and what was going on in the country.
And that resonated with somebody that is synonymous with civil rights in sports, and Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson's wife asked Bill Russell to be a pallbearer at his funeral because of how much Jackie Robinson respected Bill Russell's work in the community and with civil rights movements, to make sure that he walked it home, essentially. And if Jackie Robinson is talking about how much he meant to civil rights movements, that tells you how important Bill Russell was, like you said, to Martin Luther King's speeches and walks and things of that nature. But another guy that we want to play the clip for, and I hate to set Tim Duncan up like this, comparing having him follow what I said about Jackie Robinson, but here's Bill Russell and Tim Duncan talking about how much it meant to Tim Duncan that Bill Russell's name was attached to the NBA Finals MVP. Go ahead, Chance. I 100% agree with what Tim Duncan said. I think there's about less than 1% of the population that it's an honor for something to be named after them, not to them to be named something. And Bill Russell definitely fits that category. And no offense to the Larry O'Brien Trophy, but it wouldn't have bothered me in the slightest if a guy that won 11 of them, that trophy would have been named after him. And I'm not going to discredit them giving him the NBA MVP, Finals MVP award being named after him. But it just, for a guy like Tim Duncan, who, by the way, got a couple Larry O'Briens himself, to say, well, what an honor for the trophy to be named after you, just kind of shows you how much Bill Russell had an effect on his life as well.
And I think there's a gap, and I don't know exactly when it started. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me what you think. That Kobe was kind of that last run of guys, time period in a way that could connect. And I want to use the word value but it's too broad almost, but that kind of value the guys that came before.
To appreciate the previous generation.
Yeah, because we know how divisive it is with players now, like and how they talk. LeBron James and Jordan. These guys couldn't play back then. These guys couldn't play now, and on and on. But how they talk to each other. Will drop things in.
Do you think any of that is because they didn't draw those comparisons? Because they were the next generation, there wasn't such a time gap. Because Kobe never got compared to Mo. And I don't know if that's because there were so many stars in the NBA at that time, and when LeBron really got to the mountaintop of the NBA, he was really the face of the NBA. But you had Allen Iverson, and you had other larger than life characters. I don't want to use the word character, but like larger than life personalities in the NBA, along with Kobe Bryant. There was that time period. I really think of when LeBron made his first finals, where he was really, Dwight Howard was starting to come along. There was some other guys, but he was really it. And I think that's why that comparison gets strong. It's kind of the same thing with Michael. Is okay, you had Patrick Ewing and you had all these other guys, but they were so dominant. He was the most famous person in the world. And I think that, Kobe and that generation of guys, and Tim Duncan and Dirk Nowitzki, and those guys kind of followed Michael. And there was that gap there. And then there was such a lull in big-time marketable personalities in the NBA that's more why LeBron draws the comparison to Michael, because of their presentation off. And I think that's why you have this lack of communication between generations, because there's almost this civil war going on where there's this unfair comparison, because the rules are completely linked. I am of the belief if Michael Jordan played in today's NBA, he might average 40 a game, because I think he was that dynamic. And I think there are certain guys in today's generation that I think could absolutely have been dominant in the previous era as well. But the rules are completely different. I think it's an unfair comparison.
LeBron
LeBron
could play
any era.
I mean, he's just the size, the strength, and the ability. I think part of it though too is you could go around and Chicago had a couple guys, LA of course. You brought up the Sonics before. New York. There was a guy. There were more guys on more teams that were marketable, that were stars. When you talk late 80s, early 90s, an all-star game, it really was representative of more teams in a cross-section of kind of the league in a way. But that's how it was going into that as well. So but now, again, you bring it all together, 3-4 guys choosing to go and create these super teams takes that away from having the league a little bit more diversified in terms of the talent spread. I don't know, maybe, but I know we're getting away from the Bill Russell talk, but he wasn't the guy on the NBA. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
he
did his job. He was like, think about your Dennis Rodmans. Think about guys on the Grant on the Knicks. We can name these guys. There weren't the
two players.
Yeah, but they did their job. But off the court, they also.
Phone calls welcome today, 402-951-1620. With your thoughts on anything we're talking about today, including Bill Russell. We got probably my favorite person that calls in. Very random Mike. Random Mike, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Great show. I got to tell you, Dick Vermeil and Bill Russell. Has there ever, in the history of this country, at a Hall of Fame, did so many people stand up to the one?
Right. Yeah, that was easily my favorite part of that whole ceremony.
And how about 65 years of marriage? And they both look pretty good.
Yeah. Dick looks like he can put the headset back on sometime.
Right. No kidding. The thing that blew me away was how many people were there to honor Dick Vermeil, including Andy Reid.
17 years. It's been 17 years since he's been on the sideline, too. And that was kind of my big, when we were talking about maybe getting guys in sooner. For a guy like that was a part of so many legendary teams, and we talked about it personified in 2 movies, it feels like Dick Vermeil probably should have been in a little sooner than that, don't you think, Mike?
Yeah, but then you mentioned all those coaches that aren't in there. Yeah. Nobody gave a lot of credit to Sal Palatoni.
Yeah, how crazy was that? And when he said it, it kind of caught me off guard, but totally made sense because of the reach that Sal Palatoni has in the media. But it feels like that shouldn't have to happen for a guy like Dick Vermeil to get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but again, there's so many that aren't in there without Sal. And he mentioned the guy that made the key tackle in the Super Bowl win. He doesn't win the Super Bowl, he's probably not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I think that speaks volumes about Dick Vermeil himself, that he had the wherewithal to point that out too.
From his high school team, guys were there. It's not easy to travel, especially when you're getting older. And it's COVID era, which is still here, by the way. He's an incredible guy. And how many times has Tom Osborne been mentioned at the Hall of Fame?
Right, and I believe it's the 3rd time I remember in history that he got brought up.
Really? And guys, I remember when Vermeil was doing the ABC, and he was working with Brent Musburger on the ABC telecast. Grant Wistrom had maybe his best game. I think it was against Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma was really bad at short period there. And Vermeil was doing the game. Wistrom, one of the greatest ever, maybe his best game. And guess what? A few years later, Vermeil was running the St. Louis team. And who did they pick in the first round? Grant Wistrom. And then they picked Lawrence Phillips in spite of everything.
Probably not a coincidence there either.
No, absolutely. And but the thing about Bill Russell, man, when you're the greatest winner in the history of this country's team sport, which I think most people agree he is.
I don't think it's debatable.
You know what locks it up for him? Winning championships at the University of San Francisco.
Right, and he did it at every level, and that's why it's important. And the discussion and I think too often when we have the discussion about the greatest of all time, I think people defer to Michael Jordan because he's the most relevant, big-time winner like we're talking about here. But when Will Chamberlain and Bill Russell are left out of people's top 5s, I always question that because I don't think only certain people get the rules of their games changed for them and you can talk about the Jordan rules all you want. I think that's something you got to bring up. But they also completely changed the game because of Will Chamberlain as well. So to me, I always put Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain in my top 5.
Yeah, and you're talking about civil rights. The Celtics, Red Auerbach, incredible figure. He started an all-black team back then. This was unheard of.
It's incredible that's something like. It's incredible that we even have to continue to bring that up, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, Mike. I'm glad you did, but it's something that I think should never stop being brought up, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and what Russell had to deal with in Boston, Michael Severe talked about this. Was quite a racist town in many ways, and then when Russell moved into a nice area, he had to deal with all kinds of race vandalism in that area. I mean, you mentioned just how heartbreaking that is.
And did it with complete class. You never hear a bad story about Bill Russell. And in a world today where it's laughed at when you turn the other cheek, the fact that he did it on such a regular basis is the most impressive thing about all that. Hey, Mike, how many big Broncos are you going to have this week?
Hey, have you tried one?
Of course I have. I'm from Omaha. I'm going to give Happer a hard time when he gets here.
Are you a fan of the Big Broncos?
Oh, yeah, I'm a fan of everything in Broncos. I want a little bit of grease with my food.
All right, hey, take care, man.
Hey, thanks. That's random, Mike. Phone calls open today, 402-951-6020. That's Fitz. He's in for David Benning. I'm Jimmy Allen in for Gary Sharp. We're here with you all morning until 10 o'clock. Jacob deGrom had an absolute gem last night of a game. We're going to talk about it. Are the Mets getting hot at the right time? We'll tell you about it when we come back here on 1620 The Zone.
You're
Making progress on our way. Still going to take a while, though.
Benning in the morning on 1620 The Zone. 1620thezone.com.
It's in for Damon and Gary. Chance Oliver over on the jukebox this morning. It is 8:28 on a Monday morning. Our friend, I want to call him Andrew Shanley every time. Scott Shanley is going to join us, not his brother Andrew. Going to join us today for talk all things NFL in the next segment here. Back to the diamond for a minute. Last night, Jacob deGrom threw an absolute gem of a game for the Mets. The Mets are tied with the Yankees. We're on a 5-game losing streak and just got swept by the Cardinals this weekend, and the Astros for the second best record in the majors, and 4 games behind the Dodgers, who have a 74-33 record right now. How mad are you if you're the Padres at this moment, though? you spent all this money, you've gone out and got Juan Soto and Jay Groom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're still 14 and a half games back of the Dodgers.
It's a little bit questionable. Were they obviously looking into next year a little bit, but was their sole purpose to get back in the race within a month left before playoff time?
I think the Juan Soto thing was a future cast.
Yeah.
Let's try to be good down the line. I'm not going to fault Soto for trying to get better, but it's like you're making all these efforts to try to catch the Dodgers, and you're still almost 15 games back. But back to Jacob deGrom for a second, specifically the Mets. Last night he strikes out 12 and carried a perfect game into the 6th inning, and it's only his second start of the season for the Mets.
Looks like we crashed. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say we made the islands that we were aiming for, and next time pick it up from there. For whatever reason, the flight simulator just crashed on me, so we'll just save all that flight over the water and say we made those islands and pick it up from there next time on Microsoft Flight Simulator World Tour